Boruto became an Otsutsuki through the Shinjutsu known as karma. This allowed him to attain powers and abilities innate to the body of an Otsutsuki, but one thing he hasn't awakened is the ability to produce his own horn. This is very significant since every Otsutsuki we've seen so far possessed a design unique to themselves, and this is then seemingly used to rank these entities on the Otsutsuki tablet. And as pointed out by Boruto Reddit user Planet Chemist, it also seems as if the amount of horns an Otsutsuki possesses depends on whether they have a Rinnegan. This is shown in the fact that Kaguya, Shibai, Momoshiki, and Urashiki all possess the ability to use the Rinnegan, which coincides with them possessing 2 horns. Then you have Isshiki and Kinshiki, who doesn't have the ability to use the Rinnegan and only possess a singular horn. This then somewhat implies that the power and the abilities of an Otsutsuki is also somewhat tied to the horns they possess. Now this also brings me to the fact that the story itself has never addressed why Boruto doesn't have the abilities of Momoshiki, nor has it confirmed whether Boruto has the strength of Fused Momoshiki or Base Momoshiki. Though I do believe I've found the answer to both of those questions since they're somewhat intertwined. You see, in any story or medium, there's always a source from which a character draws their power, and better yet, there's always a place where that power is then stored. Now, in a general sense, that place would be the body itself, which means destroying the body would also mean destroying the source of that power. And as we've seen in Naruto, losing a body part can make you weaker to some degree. That's because chakra itself is generated by combining your mental and physical energy gained from every cell within your body. So what if the Otsutsuki also abide by that concept to some degree, in that the power they receive is stored in their horns? You see, I came to this conclusion after seeing a consistent pattern of the Otsutsuki's horns getting bigger after they attain more power. I think we first saw this when Kaguya consumed the chakra fruit due to her lacking the power needed to defend herself. Initially, Kaguya didn't have any horns and only displayed abilities through the use of her Byakugan. She then later gained the ability to use the Rennin Sharingan along with 2 horns after consuming the mature chakra fruit, which is pretty much a combined power of the 10 tails, the chakra absorbed from the planet, and the sacrificed Otsutsuki. We then later saw something similar with Urashiki after he consumed his own Rennegans. His horns also extended similar to that of Kaguya's. This is even more damning since it drives home the point of power being stored in different sections of the body. This makes sense because, as we learned back in Naruto, the Rinnegan itself supplies chakra and power to its user. That was explained by Obito back in the 4th Great War. So in essence, what Urashiki did was consume the power stored within his own Rennegans along with the genetic data that supplies that power, thus providing a sudden rush of energy throughout his own body, which resulted in him evolving. What this means is that the Rinnegan itself stores power that isn't stored anywhere else within the body itself, even though it's a part of the body. The same also goes for the Sharingan and the Byakugan as well. Not only does one get access to abilities your normal eye doesn't possess, the Sharingan itself and different levels to the Dojutsu provides a different level of chakra boost. As stated by Shishu himself, when using a Mangekyo, the chakra levels is several times more than with a normal Sharingan. The same goes for Sasuke saying that he can feel Itachi's power flowing into him after implanting his eyes. What this also means, which is kind of interesting, is that even though you have a Dojutsu in your own eye socket, there's a restriction on how much power you can draw from it based on the level you have active. It's very similar to how Goku can go from Super Saiyan 1, 2, and 3 to access different levels of power stored within his own body. So Urashiki consuming his own Rinnegan gave him access to all of that power within his own Dojutsu. Now this of course brings us to the moment Momoshiki experienced a similar change after he consumed Kinshiki's data and his power. It shows that his horns grew exponentially longer in both iterations of the character, which again draws a correlation with the increase in power and the increase in size of the Otsutsuki's horns. And just to clarify, this doesn't mean that Fused Momoshiki is stronger than Isshiki because his horns are bigger. The point is to draw a correlation between the increase in power and the horns' increase in size on an individual basis. Now this could mean one of 3 things. 1, it could just be for aesthetics and has no meaning in the story whatsoever. 2, the horn does increase in size when the person gains more power, but that doesn't mean that the power itself is stored within the horns. Or 3, the horn does increase in size when the Otsutsuki gains more power, and the power itself is stored within the horn itself. Now obviously I'm going with option 3 because along with the evidence I provided before, it's also heavily implied by Momoshiki and the circumstances surrounding his death. You see, as I mentioned before in my prior video on this topic, it makes perfect sense why Boruto should possess the powers and abilities of Fused Momoshiki, since that's the purpose of the karma. It pretty much allows the Otsutsuki to transfer their consciousness and power they've attained to a new body, which then allows them to resurrect and use that power. It just wouldn't make sense that the Otsutsuki would lose all the power they've attained and just revert back to their base level power every time they underwent the karmic resurrection, especially since that is their way of getting stronger. This is also explained to us in chapter 75, where it was revealed that Shibai Otsutsuki underwent multiple karmic resurrections and became so powerful that he likely ascended to a higher plane of existence. This proves that the power gained is retained and transferred to the new vessel, which should have been the case for Boruto as well, but for some reason it wasn't. Now, my hypothesis is that Fused Momoshiki's power and abilities weren't transferred over because his horns were destroyed before he was able to implant the Karma Seal. We see that this is the case in the anime continuity since he shows his horns getting vaporized and then he goes to implant the Karma. This also makes sense in the manga since Momoshiki's entire body was erased before the scene where he implanted Karma occurred. Now, you could actually argue that he implanted the Karma Seal before dying, but just chose to present himself to Boruto at that point in time, which would be fine since, as shown in the anime, he only did it after his horns were destroyed. So what if this is the actual reason why Momoshiki appears in his base form post-death? I mean, although we didn't see it on screen, what if in that instant before implanting the Karma Seal, Momoshiki reverted back to his base form after his horns were destroyed, thus causing him to lose the amplification gained by Kinshiki's power. This would explain why Momoshiki's horns are showing as destroyed post-death as well. His horns grew because of the power increase he received from Kinshiki. So when Boruto's Rasengan vaporized those extended horns, it also damaged the original. And since the Karma Seal is a backup of the Otsutsuki, they can only take a screenshot of what is currently there, not what was there before. Thus the version of Momoshiki copied over was the one with the damaged horns that reverted back to his base form. Now, a possible counter to this, because I like to put up counters to my arguments and then we can discuss them, and you guys mentioned this before when I proposed this in a prior video, was to say that Momoshiki appears in his base form since that is his true spiritual essence. So while Boruto has the genetic power of Fused Momoshiki, Momoshiki's spirit would still present itself in his original state. While this does make sense, there's one problem with it, which is the fact that this version of Momoshiki displayed the damaged horns from the fight versus Boruto. As you guys know, this is base Momoshiki's true form, which does show two medium-sized horns that somewhat protrudes and curls towards his face. The new Momoshiki, or spirit form Momoshiki, shows the top half of these horns destroyed, which lines up to what happened when he was hit with Boruto's Rasengan. So, if post-death Momoshiki was just his true form, why would he have the destroyed horns and not the original? It doesn't make sense. Now, you could argue that destroyed horns Momoshiki is the original, but I think when you have this scene showing the horns being reduced to that level pre-death and then he emerges with those changes post-death, the more likely interpretation is that this isn't Momoshiki's true spiritual form, but rather the form he took before dying. Now, some will still say that this is Fused Momoshiki, but that doesn't really make sense since he doesn't look anything like Fused Momoshiki, by the way. His horns have reverted back to the base Momoshiki design, his Byakugans are no longer golden, neither in his spiritual form nor when he takes over Boruto's body. He also doesn't have the black markings on his skin, and even the clothing reverted back to the base Momoshiki design as well. And some have brought up the fact that Momoshiki's hair is no longer, and that's why he's Fused Momoshiki, but people fail to realize this, but Momoshiki always had long hair, he just had the clip-ins to hold it up. He just doesn't have those clip-ins anymore. So it's somewhat similar to when Goku merges with Vegeta and gets some new clothing, but once they separate, the clothing they had before just returns to the original. It's also similar to Madara when he absorbed the 10 tails and gained a new drip, but then lost it once the power itself was removed. Everything just points to Momoshiki not having the power he had before. The only thing that would make sense is if the horns theory is in fact true. Another thing I found interesting is this specific scene.
Wait! No! Don't do it!
Now, why was Momoshiki so terrified at the prospect of Boruto breaking off his horn? And it's not just about him regaining control of his body. It also seems as if it would negatively affect him in some way. And as you can see, the horns never returned. So again, it does seem that the power itself is concentrated in that area to some degree. What's also somewhat weird is that before Boruto broke the horn itself, he said that he felt like it would help. But why would Boruto feel like doing so would suppress Momoshiki's power? It's almost as if Boruto could subconsciously feel the power concentrated in that area. Now, you might be wondering why Boruto's horn looks different from Fused Momoshiki's or base Momoshiki's, but I've covered that in a video from last year in October, which you guys can go check out after this one. It pretty much explains why Boruto's horn design was influenced by Shibai's DNA. It could be the case that Toneri did something to Boruto per the novels. It could be because he's Shibai's reincarnate as explained in this video, or it could also be the case that it's just a combination of all the Otsustuki DNA within his body. That would be Kaguya's, Momoshiki's, and Kinshiki's. He could go either way, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. Now, there is one more thing that I found quite interesting, which kinda supplements the theory itself, which is Kinshiki's power and speed seemingly decreasing post losing a piece of his horn to Sasuke. We can see that he never used lightning release to amp his speed or strength when fighting Sasuke and the Kage, even though he was able to casually use this technique versus Sasuke himself prior to losing a piece of his horn. He also had another ability to enhance the strength of his muscle fiber, which greatly increased his speed and strength as well, but didn't use it. This is an ability that was mentioned in the novels. He was also pretty pissed at Sasuke for breaking the horn as well, which is why he wanted to end him personally. Now I know this is a bit contrived, but we can't just ignore all this evidence that points to this being the case, no matter how ridiculous it may seem. Yes, if this is true, it would make them very vulnerable to losing the power they acquired. However, it does make sense at the same time, since there must be some consequence to acquiring such power. Maybe it's just a biological defect. Now I did get a comment on the prior video that said, if it's the case that the Otsutsuki can only back up what is currently there, how did Isshiki resurrect in his full form when he implanted Karma Seal after his lower half got destroyed? But this one is actually somewhat simple. You see, how the Karma Seal works, as explained by Amado, is that the person first converts himself or themselves into data, thus replicating themselves, and then implants it into the victim's body. In Isshiki's case, he wasn't strong enough to plant the Karma Seal on Jigen or in Jigen, which is why he chose to feed off his nutrients until he had enough energy to do so. It could simply be the case that Isshiki created the Karma Seal before he got destroyed, but didn't have enough energy to take over someone's body. So that is why he then decided to feed off Jigen's nutrients until he could implant Karma. Now he could counter this by saying that he should be able to create a full copy of himself even if his body got destroyed due to the memory within his DNA. But we know that isn't the case, since Momoshiki's full horn never returned post-death. So the Karma Seal seems to only back up the data that is present at the time of creation, which means that Isshiki had to have created this Karma Seal before he lost his lower half. So that should address the Isshiki point. So in a sense, Boruto doesn't have the powers or abilities of Fuse Momoshiki, because Momoshiki lost that power before he was able to back up the data in the form of karma and implant it into Boruto. Kawaki has access to Isshiki's full abilities and is slowly gaining more power because Isshiki implanted his karma and had his data extracted before he died. So that's pretty much the difference. With that said, I could be wrong, but you guys can let me know down in the comment section. By the way guys, only 75% of you guys are subscribed to the channel, so if you guys want to support me, go ahead and hit subscribe and also join the Discord. The link will be pinned down in the comment section. Again guys, if you guys have any questions or if you guys have any theories that makes more sense, just let me know down in the comment section or join the Discord and we can discuss it in VC. With that said guys, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.